There we go. Now we can install each print head. And now making sure that each print head is shaken, you can actually install them, and it's well indicated the colours. Just push them in there, they'll snap into place, and it's a fairly simple, fairly quick job to do this. And considering this is an A2 printer, it has a remarkably small footprint. As you can see, it's probably about the same size as an A3 printer. Everything collapses up well. The top paper feed tray pushes down, and the paper cache at the front also. So let's have a look at that. Depress the front panel there, and then just pull out the paper tray there. I would say this is possibly one of the weak points of this printer. It's very flimsy, very feeble, but for a home use it's going to be ideal, and possibly for a small studio as well, where you're not going to get heavy wear and tear on the machine. This should withstand it, but I would have preferred something a little bit more substantial from the printer at this stage. We'll test it out later on with prints. At the top here is also a single sheet media or card feeder. This is a straight paper path, and it will accept media up to 1.5 millimeters in thickness. It's well situated, and also that the print itself will rest on there as it feeds in. To collapse, we'll just push it all in and then just press in, and it snaps back home again. The paper in tray is at the rear. As I said, it's a flap that flaps down, and this goes into a triple extension, sufficiently rigid enough to accept your media. You cannot load a lot of paper in at one time, and probably you won't be wanting to do bulk A2 printing either, but it will accept up to 120 sheets of plain media or several sheets of photo media A4 size. I'm not sure how many it will take for A2 size. There probably is a limit on that, but we'll have to look at the manual, which unfortunately is in PDF format, so we've got to install the software in the computer before we can read that. But for the time being, I do know it will take up to about 120 sheets of plain media A4 paper. And the paper adjusters in the rear here. That just collapses down. I particularly like the flat surface on the top here, which means you can actually place bits and pieces on here when the printer's not in use. And Epson have also included a rear single sheet feeder that just clips onto the back of your printer, and with this we can just use it for single sheets of media only, and this is primarily matte media, and that will just feed in. Unfortunately, this printer doesn't have a roll media adapter. We're limited to single sheets or card from the front input tray, but that's no problem. I never did like actually using roll media on these printers, because the media, when it gets to the center of a core, is very difficult to straighten out again. At the rear of the printer we have our power input point there. We also have a connection for networking your printer to several computers or via Ethernet, and a USB 2 port as well. You can't connect both USB and Ethernet up at the same time. You must select one or the other. There isn't a USB cable included with this particular printer. There's relatively few controls on the actual printer itself. We've got the power on-off button, and this now puts the printer into standby mode, and we can see a progress bar along the bottom there indicating as to when the printer is going to be ready for printing or not. And here we have the indication showing you the levels of ink on there. As you can see, the bars have just slightly gone below. In fact. So what happens to the ink? Well, the ink primes the heads, it squirts it through the heads, but where does it go after that? Well, simple. There's a little secret compartment at the bottom. Just pull it out, and there is our black ink. As you can see, there's been a tremendous amount of wastage of ink just priming the heads. This happens with every inkjet printer there is on the market. Ink will be pushed through the heads, it will clean the heads, and this ink is captured into this sponge here, and this eventually will become saturated and can be used or replaced at a future stage. This is a professional feature on a printer, so don't be alarmed by this. It is quite normal. If you saw your average inkjet printer, then you would see just how much clogging up the sponge will have, or how saturated the sponge will be. And unfortunately, most printers have to be sent away to have this change at some stage or another, but it should last the life of the printer. I like the feature that the user can actually replace that as well. I'll go into the functions and the menu functions within the actual body text of the review. They're fairly straightforward. You press the button and you get various menu options, and we can scroll down the various options and then select whatever we want. But I will go into those in more detail within the review itself.